Welcome back to my channel. This is the second video in a new series, How to Design a Paul Reed Smith Guitar in Fusion 360. This is a guitar that I'm actually building for my son, so I'll be covering the entire CAD and CAM process from start to finish. In this video, I'm going to create two neck profiles that will define the shape of the neck. If you want to see more of these PRS design and build videos, click on the subscribe button. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And finally, if you're interested in the Fusion files from this series, check out my Patreon site, which is listed below. Okay, let's get started. Now that we have the scale defined and in its own component, I like to lock that component down so that it can't be accidentally moved. So to do that, I'm just going to right-click on the component in Fusion's browser and select Ground. And then you'll see a little push pin that shows up next to its icon. So now if I attempted to move this, it's not going to move. So I'll collapse the scale, and now I'm going to activate my top level component and create a new component, which I'm going to call the neck. And inside that new component, we are going to do a couple of neck profiles. So when you create a component, by default, it automatically gets activated, which means future sketches and construction plans, etc., will be inside that component. So you always want to check to see what the active component is before you start making other things that might be related to it. So I'm going to make two construction planes, and I'm going to use plane at angle because I want to actually have the plane perpendicular to these fret lines. And we can use our fancy-dancy numbers here. So I know that this is fret number 1. So I'm clicking on that line. And if I orbit around, you can see what's actually going to happen here. I'm going to rotate this plane up, and I can just type in 90 degrees. And now that's perpendicular to our neck plane. And I want to do the same at fret 12. So I can right-click and do a repeat the last command. So the last command was plane at angle, and I'm going to select this fret 12 line and then type in 90 and press enter, and now we have two construction planes. So let's open up our component and see that we have these two planes. So I'm going to hide one of them. So this first plane is at F1, so I'm just going to rename this to F1, fret 1. And I'll do the same with the other one. I'll click on this and type in F12 here. Okay. So I'm going to hide F12. And now what we're going to do is we're going to work on this profile on the first fret. Now I have a couple of, well, actually I have three different sources of information to do this profile. I have purchased a PRS printed plan which has a fret 1 and fret 12 profile, but it doesn't seem to be too precise. I also got a profile off the PRS website, which uses their thin profile. I think they call it pattern thin. And lastly, I have a PRS guitar, so I measured the neck, and I got the width at fret 1 and the height at fret 1, and then I subtracted the height of the fretboard, which I'm assuming is a 1/4 inch in its tallest position. So between those three pieces of information, I think we'll be able to do a pretty accurate job of creating a couple of profiles. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in that pattern profile off of the PRS website. So I've previously downloaded that, and I've got that in a folder here called Plans. So if I select this pattern thin. Now Fusion is asking me, well, what plane do you want to put this canvas on? I want to put it on this construction plane that we just drew. Now, this is not necessarily to scale, nor is it probably in the right position. So let's go ahead and look at this straight on. And we can also see our fret position here. So I can move this around. And basically, I want to I want the neck without the fretboard to be located right on our scale, and I kind of want this centered between the, the outer part of, you can barely see this green line, but the outer part there. So keep in mind that we have to scale this too. So I'm just going to quickly put it in position. Another thing I like to do with these canvases is really dim them so that when you're drawing on top of that, you can see your drawing. We can better see this line right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, again, we're looking straight at fret 1. Okay, so let's go back to that view. I'm going to draw a vertical line that I actually measured and calculated the fret height, I'm sorry, the neck height at fret 1 after subtracting the height of the fretboard. So I've got a height of 16 millimeters at fret 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a sketch now and create a sketch on this same construction plane. So again, we've got our neck component activated. I'll go to create sketch, and what happened was I had something pre-selected, so I'm going to actually undo that, make sure that nothing is selected on the screen. Or another approach is you can pre-select where you want your sketch to go. So I'm going to do that method. So I'm clicking on my construction plane, going up to create sketch, and now it's automatically on that construction plane. Okay, so I'm going to go get a line here, and I'm going to turn this into construction geometry, and then start from the very center and go down. Make sure that I'm getting a horizontal or vertical constraint. You can kind of see that little constraint there automatically popping up. And then I'm going to type in my dimensions. So 16 millimeters, mm. Okay, so that's going to be the height of the neck at that position. And the width, the overall width of both sides, I measured at 43 millimeters. So I'll press L for line, start here in the middle, and again, I want to keep this horizontal. Now this I don't want construction geometry for, so I'm going to go over and click in this palette and toggle that off. Okay, so I want to enter, again, I want to keep this horizontal, make sure I'm getting a constraint, and the constraint that I'm getting, you can see right in the center of the screen, I'm getting a right angle constraint there. Okay, so I'm going to type in 43 millimeters / 2, so divided by 2, because I'm just doing half the neck width here. And what we're going to do is we're eventually going to mirror everything over to the other side. So actually, let's go ahead and do that for this line that I just drew. So I'm clicking, and now I'm selecting basically the whole fret 1 position out of our scale. So I'm going to hold down my mouse button and hover over these options that are all here at this position. And when the proper line shows up in blue, I'm just going to click on that. So that's the line I just drew. I'll go up to the mirror command. I've got my geometry already selected, and that is verified in the mirror dialog box. And now I'll go down to selecting a mirror line, which is this vertical line that we just drew. So now we have a line on the opposite side. I'll click on OK. Same dimension. All right. So now we have basically these guides. I've got a vertical one and a horizontal one that define the size of the profile at fret 1. So now we can scale this drawing off of the PRS site to make it the proper size. So I'm going to finish my sketch, and then I'll open up the canvases, and I have a pattern thin canvas. I'm actually going to rename that because I'm going to use that in 2 spots here. So I'm just going to call this F1 for my first canvas, for the canvas at fret number 1. Okay, so now if I right click on that canvas and edit it, I can actually scale it, and I'm using this symmetrical scale right here. So if I get this close to the width that exists on the screen, I can move it and kind of verify that that looks pretty darn good. And so I'm scaling and positioning this. So I can just do an OK now. So now I've got a guide to do this curve. And I'm going to do this in the sketch that we were in. So lots of ways to select a sketch. I can go to the sketches folder. I could right click on this and do an edit sketch. I could do it in the timeline. But what I like doing is, if I see some sketch geometry and I want to go into that sketch, I can hover over that sketch geometry, right click, and do an edit sketch. I find that the easiest way generally to get back into a sketch. Okay, so we've got our pattern thin canvas that we're going to use. So I'm going to go up to a spline tool, click on this point, and then click on the check mark. Okay, so since we're going to mirror this spline to the other side, we want those two to be tangent. And one easy way to do that is to select its handle. So I'm going to press Escape to get out of the tool that I'm in. I'm going to select this handle, and I'm going to go up to horizontal and vertical. So now you can see the handle is horizontal. So that's going to create a tangency between this curve and when we mirror it to the other side. But we can still, if I press Escape to get out of the constraint, I can still size this back and forth, but I cannot change its angle, which is good. Okay, so now if I click on the spline, I can use the other handle. Let me hit Escape. I was a little too slow in clicking on that. Okay, so now I can size and rotate that handle to try to get this line to conform to the pattern that we see. And again, I'm going to pull this in a little bit. I'll pull this out a little bit. And that looks pretty darn good. It's not perfect, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time with that. Okay, so I now have a curve that I like, but I want to make this neck symmetrical, so I want to mirror that over to the other side. So I'll go back to the mirror command. I'll click on my spline. Now it's showing two things are selected. I'm not sure why, so I'm going to kill that selection and then just click on this spline. So I have one thing selected. And now I'm going to click on select here to select my mirror line. And now I see the curve mirrored to the other side. So I'll click OK. So now when we hover over this profile, we get basically it's a closed profile. So we'll be able to extrude this, or in this case, we'll be able to loft this between this profile and the profile we're going to do shortly on the 12th fret. So I'm going to finish the sketch here, and then we'll orbit around to see what we've got. So here's our profile. If I hide this canvas, you can see that we can hover over this profile to basically to do a loft to the next profile. Okay, so we want to do the same process here at F12. So let's show our construction plane at F12, and we can, first off, let me do it a little bit differently this way. I'm going to create the sketch first, and then we'll bring another canvas in, and I'll show you when we go back to the sketch how we're not going to see that canvas because it's going to be created after the sketch. So I'll show you how to get around that problem. Okay, so I'm pre-selecting the canvas at fret 12, and then I go up and I create my sketch. And first of all, I'm going to check and see if the neck is still the active component, which it is. So I'm creating a sketch on that plane. And let's go ahead and hide the sketch we have just completed. But before I do that, I'm going to name it so I know what it is. So this is our F1 profile sketch. And I'm going to hide that. What we're working on, I guess I can go ahead and rename that too. What we're working on is the F12 profile sketch. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's see our canvas right here. I'm sorry, our construction plane. All right, so now if we do a look at That's straight on look at what we want to sketch here. So I have the dimensions at F12, so I'm going to do the same process here. I'm going to get a line, and I'm going to make it construction, and I'll start at the center and make sure that I get a vertical constraint here. So my height, my neck height at F12 is going to be 17.5 millimeters. So I'll type that in. And then I'm going to get a line again, so I'll press L. I'm going to turn off construction geometry, start at the center and go horizontal. And my dimension there is 52 for the entire neck width. So I'll type in 52 millimeters divided by 2. Okay. And then, same as we did before, I'm going to select this line. But you see how I'm getting the entire fret there. So I'm holding down my button and basically trying to select that short line that we just defined. It should be somewhere in this list. It's quite a long list because basically we're seeing all of the frets here. So an easier way to deal with this, I think, is to simply hide our scale at this point. So now when I click on this, I can select it because there's nothing else to select there. Okay, so I'm going to do a mirror. I've already selected the line I want to mirror, so I have to click here to select the mirror line, and now it's projected to the other side. Okay, so now we have our full width and full height, and we can go up and get our spline tool, click here and here, and OK our spline, and then I'm going to press escape. I'm going to click on this spline handle and go to the horizontal vertical constraint. So that's going to fix that at horizontal, and I'll hit escape. So now at this point we want to bring in our drawing to make sure that we can, appropriately size or appropriately shape this profile to match the PRS pattern. So I'm going to make another canvas. Even though we're bringing in the same drawing, we're going to scale it differently, and we're going to put it at a different position. So I'm going to bring it in again by finishing our sketch, then doing an insert canvas, going to our plans, and here is the pattern thin drawing. And so Fusion is asking us what plane to put this on. I'm going to click on our construction plane at F12. So now it's in there. And our opacity is already set down nicely. So we want to position and scale this. So let's look straight at it. And I'm going to move this down. And I'm also going to do a symmetrical scale here, somewhere around there. Move it back into position, maybe a little bit bigger. So a little hard to control this, so I found zooming in will help you be a little bit more accurate. So that looks close enough for us to approximate this curve. Okay, and you can see that when we scale this pattern, it doesn't really match up well. But I trust my dimensions that I calipered off a neck more than this pattern, because I think this pattern is just showing a single fret position, perhaps even at the nut. So we're just kind of using it as a rough guide at this point. So I'm going to click on OK, and then I will click on my spline, right click, and edit sketch to get back in that sketch. Now this is the problem I wanted to show you. Since I added that canvas after the sketch was created, and you can see in the timeline, here's the sketch that was created, and then the canvas was added after that. When you edit a sketch, you go back in time on the timeline, so the canvas is not there. So let's finish our sketch, and I'll show you how to fix that. I'm going to click on the sketch in the timeline, and I'm going to drag it past the canvas definition. So now, when let's get back in the sketch this way. I'll right click on it in the timeline, edit sketch, and now you can see your canvas. So that's something that threw me for a long time in Fusion. It's like, why did I just lose my canvas? And it's really timeline based. Okay, so now we have that sketch. I don't really need our construction plane anymore, so I'm going to hide that. All right, so now we've got our horizontal constraint here. Let's go ahead and kind of size this so that it, somewhat matches the profile that we brought in. And I would say that's pretty good right there. Okay, so before we finish the sketch, we want to mirror this over to the other side. So I'm going to click on it, go to mirror, and then select our mirror line, get it on the other side, and click OK. And we can come back at any time and modify this. And now that it's mirrored, all we have to do is change one side, and you'll see that both sides are changing. I'm going to undo that. But so, and it's no problem to come back in here and redefine this. And I think I'm going to finish the sketch. I think what we want to do here is take a look at the PRS plan that I have. So we're going to bring in a couple more sketches and just kind of confirm that the profile is somewhat close to that printed plan that I purchased. So before I do that, I'm going to go to my canvases and click and do a second click and call this F12. Okay. And now let's hide F12. Let's show F1. And let's show the F1 construction plane. And let's do the same for our sketches. So I'm going to hide F12, profile sketch, show F1. So that's all we're seeing now. So we're actually going to, I guess I don't want to see the canvas. I'm actually going to bring in another canvas and put it right here in the same spot. So I'm going to do an insert, go to my plans, and I have an F1 that this is off of the purchase plan that I have. So I'm going to select the construction plane, and now you can see that drawing. And so I'm going to kind of put that in the right spot. Now, this one I actually did some measurements on, and this kind of jives with what I got when I calipered the neck, when I measured the neck. So I'm going to scale this canvas. Unfortunately, you have to get out of the canvas and right click and do a calibrate. Okay, let's look straight on at it. Get it back in view here. So when you're in calibrate, you just make 2 points. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click here, and then a measurement's going to pop up. This measurement should be my 16 millimeter height. So I'm going to type in 16 millimeters. That's going to scale that canvas automatically. So now it's just a matter of positioning the canvas. In order to do that, I'm going to right click and do an edit canvas, and then move this little guy so we can get that in the center of the screen. And you can see it's not an exact match. So maybe we want a little bit more steepness to this curve. Well, let me get this a little bit more accurately in the middle. And you can see the drawing is not very symmetrical here. But I'm gonna go a little bit more with the drawing here, kind of halfway between the Paul Reed Smith section and this one. So we have edited our canvas. It's in the right position. So now I can click, right click, edit our sketch, and let's go ahead and hide our construction geometry. But we do want our canvas to show up. So where is our canvas? Okay, so we're running into the same problem. I defined a canvas after the sketch. So this time I'm going to go to the timeline and I'm going to drag the canvas before the sketch, and then right click here and get back into the sketch. Okay, so now we're seeing the F12 sketch too, so I'll hide that. All right, so here's the line that we actually want to shape a little bit. And we have 2 F1 canvases, so we can kind of turn them on at the same time and maybe take a happy medium between the two. So I'm going to click on we're in our sketch, so I'm clicking on this spline, and then I'm going to get the spline handle right here. Try to get the spline handle. There it is. And there. Let me get it from above. So, not being real successful in getting that spline handle. Let me get out of the sketch and get back in this sketch. So this is our F1 profile sketch. So I'm going to click, right click, edit sketch. Let's see now if it's a little easier to select this. Okay, now it is. All right, so I'm just going to modify this ever so slightly, and it looks like it kind of matches up with the printed plan a little bit better now. Okay, so I'll finish the sketch. I'm going to hide the printed plan at F1 and also the pattern thin PRS drawing at F1. Turn the other pattern thin on, turn the other profile sketch on, and now we're going to bring in one more canvas. But we're going to be a little bit smarter this time. We're going to rewind the timeline before the sketch that we want to edit, which is our F12 profile sketch. And let's see, we want to turn our construction at F12 back on. Okay, so there's our pattern thin, and same issue here. We do not have our sketch defined yet, so I'm going to move out in the timeline a little bit so that we see our sketch. Okay, so now we're going to bring in another canvas. But again, I want to rewind this before the sketch, insert, go to our plans, here's our F12 drawing, insert that, select the construction plane at F12 to put it on, and now we have to size it and scale it. So you can see this one is 17.5, so I'm going to scale first here. So I'll get out of my canvas edit, and I will right click and do a calibrate. Let's look straight at it, and let's turn off the Paul Reed Smith one. So that's this one here. Okay, so I'm in calibration, so I'm clicking here and here, and then typing in 17.5 millimeters and press enter. So that's now scaled. Okay, so let's turn on our sketch. Well, let's see our sketch by manipulating the timeline. So now we see the F12 sketch, and now I can go back into this F12 drawing and do an edit canvas, which will allow us to move this around. And when we get that centered, you can see this actually looks pretty good. What we did as far as the geometry here at F12, I think nicely matches the drawing from the printed plan that I have. So I'm just going to do an OK here, and no manipulation is needed. So let's turn all our canvases off. Let's turn all our construction stuff off, and let's make sure our two sketches are on. So when we zoom out, here are our two sketches. So this is the profile at F1. This is the profile at F12. So now, very simply, all we have to do is a loft. So I go up and get the loft command. I click in this profile. I click in this profile. And there's our neck, or at least the section of the neck between F1 and F12. So in the next video, we will continue with the neck, probably working on the heel side, extrude or offset that into the heel and define the heel.